God's activity in the world around him. He says, this was God. In some wild way, this was God. And Joseph does something with his interpretation that I genuinely believe to be timeless. He expands his focus from a very short period of time to a longer period of time. He widens his view. And on this occasion, he widens his view by engaging with God on his own terms. Joseph's terms, by my estimation of this story, are terms of betrayal, famine and hunger, and a very tenuous relationship with Pharaoh and power. And as a result, his own material safety and stability. But at the same time, in this Joseph story, somehow these terms are also forgiveness, integrity, and reconciliation. Joseph widens his view. And I think that is part of what makes this short novella about Joseph to be pretty timeless. Somewhere in the story, in the midst of a world where those meant to keep Joseph safe instead sell him as a commodity, in a world where material richness exists on one day and exists alongside striking hunger and famine the next day, in a world where animosity lingers through space and time, all the way from Canaan to Egypt, something significant happens in the story. I find that somewhere in the story, Joseph interprets his own life through a lens of things divine. And what follows is a shift in his relationships with people. Let me spoil the remainder of the sermon here, because everything that follows relates to that statement. Somewhere in the story, Joseph interprets his own life through a lens of things divine, and what follows is a shift in his relationship with people. And so let that serve as a warning as well, an honest warning. If you are looking for everything to remain exactly as it is right now, you have permission to tune me out, to tune out the Joseph story. However, in my life and in my world, the story of Joseph resonates because there are some people and some relationships that I would really like to see a tangible shift in. A tangible shift towards that reconciliation and that integrity and that justice of God. Perhaps that's also what makes the Joseph story a little bit timeless. There's a number of distinct perspectives, distinct intersections I can speak from personally. Today, if only for a minute or two, I'd like to speak from my distinctly queer perspective. When we talk about things like freedom and relationship to reconciliation, there are experiences that I've had as a queer person within society and within the church that really inform how I think about those things. Maybe you resonate with that. Maybe you resonate with freedom and reconciliation from a totally different perspective and from totally different experiences. When we talk about things like forgiveness and our relationships to one another, there are experiences that I've had as a queer person that really inform my perspective. And when we talk about our relationships being a unique reflection of our relationship with God, my experiences as a queer person really inform my perspective. That's something I find beautiful and incredible about the Bible as a sacred text, just as a side thought. That the Bible might not be overwhelmed when I bring all of this to it, when I might engage with God on my own terms. that there's plenty of room to bring what you've got, that's something I appreciate about the Bible. And I think Joseph can attest to that too. Coming to God on his own terms. Betrayal by those so very close. Those that at one point Joseph certainly called siblings, but now may perhaps call them enemies. I think Joseph can attest. As a queer person, for me, freedom and reconciliation have a complicated, albeit true, relationship to one another. Because for me, I won't go back in that closet. I won't go back into that pit. I won't be giving up the coat of many colors that I wear. Freedom and reconciliation. As a queer person, forgiveness in my relationships comes with real questions about my own health and my own well-being and my own safety and survival. Forgiveness. And as a queer person, I believe that our relationships can often be a unique reflection of our relationship with God. Those instances where we see and hear one another, know one another, extend kindness and love to one another for no other reason than to find a place for that abundant kindness and love to go. As a queer person, I believe that when we see each other and hear each other like that, there is something divine occurring. This is a sermon about forgiveness, reconciliation, integrity, and justice, but this is distinctly a sermon about people and relationships. A sermon about Joseph and Joseph's story is one where we acknowledge how complicated and how messy and how tumultuous Joseph's relationships are. We also acknowledge how different those relationships look after Joseph looks through a divine lens. That's where forgiveness and reconciliation come in. That's where integrity and justice come in. Because pause for a moment and consider the weight of Joseph's betrayal. This is a sermon about forgiveness and reconciliation, integrity and justice, but it is distinctly a sermon about people and relationships. If we lose sight of the people, I believe we have lost sight of those who Christ distinctly has an eye for. And that's where our story from Luke comes into this sermon as well. This is a story about Joseph, but it's also accompanied by this particular text in Luke about loving your enemies. As the account goes, Jesus the Christ spoke these words before his disciples and a crowd of people who had gathered explicitly to hear from him. And let it be said that what Jesus offers here is, in its own way, radical. Treat your enemies not like your enemies, but like your loved ones. Are you serious? But here is what I would like to acknowledge in this text alongside the Joseph story, holding both of them at once. Jesus acknowledges that we have enemies. Have you ever taken a moment to sit with that? Jesus acknowledges that we have enemies. Yes, he offers that we love our enemies, but nonetheless acknowledges, as divine becoming very human, that we as people seem to have enemies. And so alongside the Joseph story, I want to offer this reflection this morning. One that I wholeheartedly admit I am doing imperfectly. Start with that and end with that. Alongside the Joseph story, this is the reflection that I have to offer. Enemy or sibling? Enemy or sibling? As we evaluate who it is, the relationships in our world, personally, collectively, geopolitically, societally, I think we would do well looking to both the story of Joseph, whose siblings seemed to transform into enemies and then somehow, by the grace of God, back into siblings. I think we hold that at the same time that we hold acknowledging that we have enemies. Freedom and reconciliation, it's a complicated relationship for me. Because I don't think I'm meant to give up my freedom for the sake of reconciliation. In fact, I think I know someone who already did that for me. Enemy or sibling? How might our world look different if we had more siblings and less enemies? I am not doing this perfectly, especially now, the last few weeks. I have not been doing this perfectly. But what I am finding is that there's a whole lot of siblings around, and potentially a whole lot less enemies and adversaries than I first thought. So what I'll conclude with, I can't decide for you, but I trust you. I trust you to pull in the folks that you trust, to talk it out, to offer it to God, and to come with it with enough of an open heart to say, God, is it possible you might be shifting something in my relationships right now? Forgiveness, reconciliation, integrity, justice. These things don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in our relationships with one another. May God illuminate in us the reconciliation and justice we desire to see in the world around us. May we hold the story of Joseph and the words of Jesus in Luke 6 at the very same time. Amen and amen.
So our next song, a little bit of information. Christ, your words of love confound us. This is a hymn written by a hymn writer named Carolyn. Her website's Carolyn Hymns. And she based this hymn off of Martin Luther's sermon to my enemies. And I have a feeling we're going to be singing these words a lot this year because of everything going on. But I think there's good text from here. And I know so many of our hymns were written in responses to events happening in that era. And I think it's one of the issues that I've had with a lot of contemporary Christian music. You know, they're written to be a product, and where I'm at in my heart is I'm looking for songs that were written out of life, what's happening in our world. And so having a text based off of a Martin Luther sermon to me seems very impactful. The music for this is set to What a Friend We Have in Jesus, which I also like pulling that melody for these words in the back of your head as we sing these. Christ, your words of love confound us, even as we give you praise. For the lessons that you teach us seem so far from this world's ways. How can we love those who hate us? How can we love our enemies? What of people who abuse us? How can we love even these? Make us mindful of his action, not a feeling that uplifts. In each daily situation, love's the greatest of all gifts. It's the wiser, stronger person who will break the chains of hate. Love can usher in redemption. Love can make a people great. And faced with those who seek to hurt us, make us confident and free. You don't call us to be helpless, but to stand with dignity. Lord, when others are demanding, may we know they matter more than our money or possessions. May we share, not keeping score. If we love just those who love us, where's the giving? Where's the grace? Even enemies do this. They have friends that they embrace. May we do unto others as we'd have them also do. You have shown us love is action. May we love and make things new.
Thank you, Matt and Leah. That was a really beautiful song. Great things to think about. So now's the time for our communal response and our prayers and celebrations. And so Matt has the mic. And if there's anyone online who would like to comment, you can do that in the chat. So who would like to start?
Thank you. My name is Liliana, she, her, and pastor. I preach from this passage many times, and I love the story because I always related it to an immigrant story. And I identify a lot with